Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending where you are on the planet. I'm Daniela De Paulis. I'm the founder and director of Signing Space, and I'm very pleased to start again with the workshop series. And the message hasn't been decoded yet, so there is room for more workshops. And today we are truly honored to have a special guest, Dr. Sheri Wells Jensen. Sheri is a 2023 NASA and the Library of Congress Chair in Astrobiology and Professor of Linguistics. And the workshops is kindly hosted by the SETI Institute, and behind the scene is Jasmine Edges from the SETI Institute, who is making this possible. So thank you, Sheri. It's great to have you. The floor is yours, and we are here listening to your talk and taking questions at the end.
Nice. Thank you so much, Daniela. I'm so delighted to be here. Anytime I get to do anything with SETI, it just makes my day sparkly. I am so honored to be here. So thank you to Daniela. Thank you, Jasmine, for running the behind the scenes stuff and for flicking the next button on my primitive slides here. I really appreciate that as well. Keeps my hands free for reading. I also like to thank the Kluge Center at the Library of Congress, who has sponsored this 9 months for me as the Brooke S. Blumberg Chair in Astrobiology. It's just such a delight to be here, and I could not be here without them. And my co-author on this particular project, Alyssa Zuber, for being awesome in all ways. So here we go, and we're talking today about theories and practices of first contact survival. So Jasmine, if you go ahead and pop the first slide up there, that's just my contact, my name and my email address, which I will spell out SWELLSJ @bgsu.edu. That's Bowling Green State University.edu. I'm delighted to receive anybody's cries of alarm, complaints, corrections, whatever you've got going after you think about this. One of the best things about giving these talks is meeting the cool people who listen to them and have better ideas than I did when I put the thing together. So thank you in advance for anyone who wants to do that. There's a version of this paper that's published, and the URL is there. It's not really clickable on the screen share, so I'd be happy to send it to you. It's published in an old version, an old episode. No, episode is not what we call journals. We call them editions of religions online, and I'm grateful to those folks as well for allowing me to publish that. So the thing that we're talking about here is the problem. If you hit the next slide there for me, Jasmine, the problem of first contact is always, we talk about it in, in science fiction. It usually goes one of two ways. Either it's the Star Trek universe and everything is cotton candy and unicorns and it's beautiful and we're so grateful to be discovered and it's all wonderful, or they just come and kill us all. And between there, which lies multitudes of possibilities, which we slowly explore with science fiction. So kudos to all the science fiction writers and readers out there, because that's super necessary work. But one of the things that we talk about in terms of first contact is the reality that we are a very young technological species. We have just had radio for, roughly 100 years. So in the cosmic calendar, that is less than nothing. We are toddlers, we are diapered creatures running around babbling, just barely pulling ourselves into the technological age. So, which is fine, mad props to us for getting this far, right? We did it. So far, we're good. Hopefully we'll keep getting better. But because we are so young, odds are that anybody we contact is going to be more sophisticated, have more technology, be further along the way to wherever we're all going than we are. So this presents opportunities, risks, and dangers, right? How is that going to go for us when these people who will know, I don't know, I think the questions are open whether they're going to be ethically, morally further along, whatever the heck that might mean, than we are. But we do imagine that they will have more technology. And so that makes them dangerous. It also makes them potentially very helpful. And so we look around the world, we look around Earth anyway, for analogs of this. So what can happen when a big, strong culture comes crashing down onto a culture that is less technologically advanced. And what we have as analogs of that on Earth are not super promising, right? When explorers, quote, explorers, or discoverers, quote, discoverers, came to new territory historically on our beautiful planet, they caused a lot of harm. They killed a lot of people. They destroyed a lot of cultures. It's not a pretty thing. So the question then is, do we have anything? Is there anything else here that we can cling to as some kind of model where a stronger group has come upon a weaker group and kind of they manage to coexist, and when one of them doesn't get wiped out, right? That's the question. That's the thing that we need, is any model that we can use on Earth where contact between less powerful groups happened and it wasn't a complete freaking disaster for the less powerful group. So we hit the next slide, please. So there is a model for this, and it is the disabled people and non-disabled people. The problem I always have with this presentation when I give it is that when I start talking about the examples that are about to happen, lots of people want to say, no, that doesn't happen, or that couldn't happen, or people aren't really like that. Come on. So it might be useful for me to give you a 3-second diverge into my background. I am a fully blind person. I've been blind since birth, and I've been on the planet for some decades, and have lots of kindred souls who are also disabled, living in a world that was not designed for us, living in a built environment that's not designed for us. So I promise you, I'm not making this mess up. And I also promise you that all of the stuff that we're about to talk about is still happening. So people don't really, that when I talk about disabled people as a mass group, certainly we are all different. It's like that Monty Python, skit. We are all individuals, right? And they say is a multitude. And there's a lot of diversity within any group. But one of the problems that happens for people when you try to discuss disabled people as a group is it's hard for people to imagine. There are no reservations for us. We are live everywhere. We are all around. So it's hard to think of us as an aggregate, I think. And also there are exceptions. When I talk about the barriers that are in the way of disabled people, someone always says to me, well, what about that blind guy that climbed Mount Everest? And, what about the fact that my students always say to me when I talk about discrimination and when I talk about ableism, there's a certain group of them that always wants to say, well, you have a job, and I do, and I'm happy about it. But it was not easy. And there are to some degree exceptions that make the rule, right? So we need to rely on data, not the stories that we can tell about individuals. And also people just don't want to think this stuff is really this bad. But disabled people are much more likely to live in poverty than our non-disabled peers. Systematically, we lack access to sufficient and appropriate education. 20% of the population of Earth right now has some kind of disability. Only 2% of the PhDs in STEM field have been awarded up to this point to people with disabilities. So we're definitely underrepresented in STEM. Our graduation rates are much lower. Disabled people generally have much more restricted movement than our non-disabled peers. Think about the building you're in right now. Can someone in a large wheelchair enter the room in which you're sitting now? In my case, the answer is a solid no, because I'm at the top of a long flight of stairs, right? So we're also more likely to be the victims of violent crime, both domestically and on the street. And historically, we have been targeted by sterilization campaigns. We are more likely to be incarcerated. We're more likely to be killed by our governments around the world than our non-disabled friends. So we do represent a minority, and mostly the story isn't so great. Hit the next slide for me, please. And yet here we are. We're still here. We're actually doing kind of good. We are persisting. 20% of the world's population is disabled, and there's no evidence that that number is decreasing. In fact, The number of disabled people alive today as a proportion of the civilization as a portion of the population is actually increasing. Medical science has allowed us to keep more people alive, and the degree of civilization that we have, our removal from the necessities of hunting and gathering, means that some of us can make a living without going out to kill tigers. Which is useful because I probably could not kill a tiger at all. And honestly, and I know I talk about these numbers and they seem stark, but certainly there are many, many millions of loving and mutually beneficial and egalitarian relationships between individual disabled people and our families, right? We don't just all live in mortal terror of the rest of humanity all the time, right? Good things happen. So we're persisting, we're doing okay. But the question, and if you hit the next slide for me, the question is really why? Why in the world should this be happening? What has kept disabled people alive? What keeps us at 20%? Why are we still here? Why haven't we been wiped out? And the answer to that question has a multitude. There's a multitude of answers to this question, right? There's a lot of ways in which disabled people manage to live in a world where we are surrounded largely by non-disabled kin. How is that done? And the way that that's done, the reason that we're here lies in the way that we think about disability. So what I'm going to run you through in the next few minutes here is kind of, y'all are going to get like the first 6 weeks of my Intro to Disability course in about 12 minutes. So hold tight. It's going to be a ride. But it is always about how we think about things, right? Things are never just things. People are never just people. We all have preconceptions and models of the way that we interact. Like, what does it mean to be disabled on Earth today? Whatever your answer to that question is, will mediate the way that you interact with the next disabled person that you meet. So what I'm going to give you is about a half dozen ways in which historically, so diachronically and synchronically, disability is understood in the world. Okay, so let's hit the first one, which is arguably maybe the harshest. And the epigram at the top says, "The Lord will smite you with madness and with blindness and with bewilderment of heart." I don't know what bewilderment of heart is, but it sounds bad. It sounds super bad. So this is the religious model, the moral religious model, part one. There's a part two coming up. But historically, and this is still alive and well today, disability is conceptualized as the result of sin, the violation of ethical rules. And this is not, my epigram here is from Christianity, but it's not only Christian thought. It's not only Western Christian thought that holds this. Maybe it was your past life is also a way of thinking about this problem. So, and the bigger the sin, either yours or your family's or a group to which you belong, the bigger the sin, end quote, the more severe, quote, quote, your disability might be. So in some sense, what goes around comes around model. And if you have broken ethical rules or your parents have, then this is the result. There is a repercussion, either inflicted on you by a deity, or just as the result of the way the spiritual world is built. So what if now we have our more powerful extraterrestrial friends who come and encounter us? What if, and we play the role of the weaker civilization here, right? So we're playing the role of the disabled people, and they are playing the role of the non-disabled, the dominant group. So if this is their model and they come upon us, what will they do? Well, the best result would probably be shunning. I mean, that's kind of what that's a model that we've used with disabled people. You are sinners. I'm going to keep away from you. I'm going to keep myself pure by keeping away from you because you guys have done something really bad and you're now paying the cost for it. And thank you, we're not involved. See you later, if ever. So this would be an interesting answer to the Fermi paradox, right? So maybe the Fermi paradox, maybe what's happening, maybe the reason that we have nobody here is that they had a look and like, nope, those guys are sinners. They have violated all kinds of ethical rules. We are not hanging out with those people. I mean, the other side of that would be eradication, right? You discover a group of people who have broken your moral rules so badly that they must be eradicated. Always possible. Probably not an economic likelihood. It would cost, it's a lot to come to another planet just to wipe people out. Why would they bother? But again, if that's their role, if that's their model of first contact, then we might be in some trouble. Either way, it's no fun for us, and we're not going to get to meet them and hang out. So if you hit the next slide, there's the opposite, the other version of the religious moral model. Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. So this is the flip side of this, right? Which is also prevalent across, again, my epigram is from Christianity, but it's not just Christian thought. So this is the idea that you have been selected by some divine force so that the holy work of the Creator can be demonstrated to all those other people in your life. So this is where you get the idea is that disabled people are around so that other folks can do good deeds and therefore, win God's favor, or so that the other manifestation of this is people who will pray over disabled people, expecting that God will come down and heal us in a burst of flame or something. I don't know. This I promise you, this is real. It still happens. It's been a couple years since someone has accosted me in public and demanded to pray over me, or at least tried to make that happen. It never works out quite as they've expected when they try to do it with me, but it does still happen. So the idea is that you're special, you're set aside, you are the chosen ones, you are an opportunity for grace and holiness to happen to you. Okay, so the implication here, the problems with if ET has this idea to us, like, oh, look at those poor afflicted souls, they are here for the glory of some spiritual being to come and be made manifest. One of the problems with this, one of the things that would be a problem for us if this were the way it works out, is that there's a certain role that you have to play if you are a holy and chosen person. If you don't play that role, you're immediately and quickly discarded. Or if somehow we don't stand up to that, we don't measure up, like, wait, you earthlings you're afflicted, you're supposed to be really kind or really insightful or intuitive or have psychic powers or something, and we don't. And so now it's a problem. This rarely translates when someone has this model of disability on Earth. It rarely translates into equality. You don't have equal access. You have certain privileges. Maybe you're given a special place to sit, but you're not trusted partners. You would never take someone like this and say, hey, come learn my science. It's more like, you stay over there. We will maybe hold you in awe, but we sure as heck are not going to make you an ensign on our starship. It's just not going to happen. So again, we could give us some interaction, but never equality. So hit the next slide for me. This is the charity model. This is a quote from Margaret Thatcher. No one would remember the Good Samaritan if he had only good intentions. He had money as well. So this is the idea that disabled people cannot be expected and cannot be trusted to make our own way in the world. We must be the recipients of charity. That's what it's all about. So now this one, there's a little more potential here for humankind to get some goods, right? So if we are the recipients of charity, if this is their model, if their model is that we have a charitable model toward these less developed civilizations, let's help those poor, pathetic people out. So we might initially get some goods from this, right? They might come down and do some things for us. They might solve some of our problem. They might provide us with some of the things that we desperately really need and want. The difficulty with the charity model is that the givers of the charity always know best. You never see, I mean, there are of course better ways of doing this, but the classic, I'm going to bring a Thanksgiving dinner to you poor, unfortunate souls. You never see them saying, oh, and by the way, how would you like that turkey done? And do you want cranberry sauce with that? Or do you want sweet potatoes? What do you really want? As a rule, if the charity providers, at least in the prototypical sense, are in charge of what you get, they know what you need, and they go out and they give it to you. Certainly, again, all these models have nuances. So it's not really sustainable. If we are perceived by ET as in need of and recipients of their charity, it might be nice for a little while. But it's again, not a great way to achieve parity, to be welcomed as co-citizens, as equals. And maybe we wouldn't get that anyway, but in this model, at least we have some hope of A, surviving, and B, benefiting to some extent, as long as they're interested in providing the charity. You get the next one for me, please. I don't have an epigram for this one. I've searched around, but I've not found anything satisfying. But this is actually the most common model for disability that's prevalent around the world today, at least in the United States and Western civilizations. It's Western countries. It's kind of what people think. So disabled people are nothing more than broken versions of non-disabled people. There's nothing complicated about it. If you can't see, for example, our whole thing is just going to be, we're going to work on fixing your vision, and if we can do that, that's the goal, and that's the whole problem. So everything that we do is medicalized. Our goal is to change your body to get you to a point where you are like everybody else, and that is the goal. We're not interested really in any wisdom that you might have. We know best. We're the doctors. We're going to fix you up. We're going to make you better, and let you loose as a regular member of society that's not damaged. This is the one of my nightmares, actually. This is the one that freaks me out if I think about it for too long. So if we are patients, if we are viewed as in need of correction, either cultural or biological, we might see some initial benefits, and it might be kind of fun, like if they give us all some new groovy sense that we didn't ordinarily have. But do we really want that? And what happens to us? This is a nightmare to me. What happens if they say, well, you guys are clearly suffering from the disease of being human, and we're going to cure that disease by doing XYZ to you, by taking these flawed biological bodies that you have and putting you in robot bodies, or moving your consciousness out of the material world completely and making you into, I don't know what, computers. I don't know what they got. But this terrifies me. It's the idea that your body is no longer yours. And certainly in the medical context, when you go to a doctor, and sometimes you're really grateful for this, right? You want your body to be changed. But if you are comfortable in your body and you don't perceive yourself as in need of healing, the idea that someone else is going to come by with a new set of ideas about how you should be in the world is kind of terrifying. And this, I think that if unquestioned, this is maybe the main model of disability that most people have. Disabled people are kind of waiting around for medical science to catch up with us, and then we'll be healed, and then everything will be better. And then thinking about the implications, if ET holds that idea about humanity, might be a little bit scary. It's scary to me anyway. Let's see, hit the next slide, please. I really don't ever want to give a presentation without, quoting the Ferengi, because Ferengi have all this knowledge. Nothing is more important than your health except your money. Ferengi, that's Ferengi rules of acquisition number 23. So in this model of disability, the problem is all about your value as a producer. It's a totally economic thing. You are valued to the extent that you can participate economically in the community. And in this case, we have questions about if the disabled person on Earth cannot produce adequately, what is the right way to work on this? And we can be nice about it, and we can, take care of them, but it's somebody's problem, right? And it's all about the funding. It's all about the money. So Is it better to institutionalize people? Is it better to care for them at home? These are economic questions. They're not questions about what the person wants or what they might need or what's good for them. We don't care, because we're all about people as earning units, right? It's all about your ability to work. So this one also, I don't know, this one also might turn out really bad for us, and also might, what could we contribute as this baby race, as these people without, I mean, maybe we have some cultural stuff that might be fun. I don't know, but maybe we don't. And what if we don't? What could we contribute to a super advanced global economy? Is there anything that humanity has? I mean, a hopeful idea would be that they all, everybody falls in love with yo-yos or something, right? There's some kind of cultural thing that ET would say, oh my gosh, we met these new species and they've got yo-yos and we love that. It's so cool. But would we then stay in charge of the yo-yo distribution? I just don't know. I feel very wary about our ability to survive if, in fact, as a young technological species, we are valued strictly for our economic value. And this might, though, offer us another answer to the Fermi's paradox, right? Maybe we have not been contacted because they don't figure we have anything to contribute yet, and so they're just going to leave us alone until and unless we do something more interesting or arrive at a place where we could contribute. Don't know. It's possible. Hit the next slide, please. This epigram here is from Stella Young, who was an amazing, wonderful, articulate, smart human being. And it says, no amount of smiling has ever turned a flight of stairs into a ramp, and no amount of standing in between shelves of books and radiating your good attitude has ever turned those books into Braille. So Stella Young was an articulate advocate for the social model of disability, which says that the disability lies in the environment, not in the person. So if you have a person in a wheelchair outside a building, the problem is not that the person is in a wheelchair. The problem is that buildings have stairs. So the person who is driving around in a wheelchair does not have a choice about driving around in a wheelchair, but we absolutely have a choice about whether that building has stairs or not, right? So the principle of universal design, which is part of the social model of disability, that gives us the idea that we can design an environment that is usable by everyone. So we lose nothing by putting in ramps, for example, and we gain the fact that our buildings are now accessible to everyone, and also we can get up there with our strollers and our roller bags, right? So the principle of universal design gives us the theory that if you design for inclusion of everyone, you make things safer, more convenient, and more comfortable for everyone. And we have some mainstream examples of universal design in action. And the classic example, of course, is the curb cut. So 30, 40 years ago, walking around the streets of any big city, you're up on the curb, which keeps you away from the cars. It's supposed to separate the people from cars. Every corner has a big step down, and you cross the street, and then there's a big step up. Impossible for you to get your wheelchair up and down those streets. So the idea was, well, why do we need to make, why do we have to have those steps like that? Why don't we make a nice ramp going down from the sidewalk into the street? So we make a nice ramp. And then not only can the wheelchair users whiz up and down those ramps, but also the people who are dragging a wheelie bag, or who are pulling along a stroller, or who are just don't want to trip over the doggone curb, right? So the presence of curb cuts is the classic example of universal design in action, because a curb cut makes things easier for everyone. But it doesn't stop it there. A lot of the initiatives historically and technologically that started as accommodations for disabled people have gone mainstream, and we all love them now. We all use them. For example, the captions on all your videos. I know people who just keep the sound turned way down on their videos. They're not deaf, but they just want to look at the captions. They don't want to listen to the thing, or maybe they can't because they're sitting in the back of my classroom and they don't want me to know that they're watching a movie while I'm teaching. It happened only once, and I did catch them. But anyway, so that was initially an accommodation for deaf folks, right? If you can't hear the dialogue, let's put it on the screen. And now everybody loves that. It's everywhere. We all use it, right? The other example is optical character recognition. The idea that you could take a document and scan it and put it into text on a computer. Again, it was a cool idea for blind people in the 1970s. They were selling these machines about the size of a small car that had a flatbed scanner on top and a voice synthesizer hooked up to it and a computer, again, like a big old giant computer, because that's what we could do then. That would take a sheet of paper and scan it and read it out loud or put it on a computer, so you could do whatever you wanted to with it on the computer. When I was a kid, this was amazing, and it was tech, and we all thought, well, that's really cool, but who's really ever going to need that? It's nice for the blind people, but who's ever going to really need that? And yeah, everybody needs that. Everybody wants that now, right? So if ET has a social model of disability, which I think is maybe sort of likely, especially if there's a lot of folks out there and they have a lot of different body shapes, right? They might be accustomed to building their physical buildings and running their information flows in ways that are accessible. So if ET has this plan, and I think it's likely, the social model of disability, if they have this plan, this could be great for us, because if they're used to working with a lot of different people, a lot of different kinds of beings with different body plans and different sensory inputs, they might be used to building their buildings in a way that can accommodate lots of different kinds of people, right? It could be just the way things are done. They could take it for granted that people have different sensory inputs and different kinds of bodies. I recommend to you the science fiction of, I always forget her name, Becky Chambers, in her Wayfarers series, where there are just different people with different shaped bodies and different kinds of sensory apparatus just all over her science fiction. And it's a very social model of disability, by which I mean everyone is always thinking about, well, how do I make sure that every kind of alien creature that comes to this building has access? It's also rocking good science fiction, so recommend it. You hit the next slide for me. So the conclusions of this. So it brings up more questions than answers, really. So one of the questions I think that people, this is not my idea, people have asked this question before. So how would so very proud, so very capable Earth and our aspirations and our lofty goals and our feeling that that we have stewardship over our planet and are reaching out to space, how are we going to adjust to the idea that maybe we are now the quote disabled in the community? How is that going to fly for people? And I think people have been talking about this for a while. That's certainly not my idea, but it's relevant in this context. And also, how would we deal with that shock? And then would we, as sort of the royal we, I guess, would we as a society, would we turn to our disabled kin for help in dealing with that transition from top dog to weak little puppy? How would we do? How would we certainly know there are millions of human beings every year that make that transition from able-bodied person to disabled person. They have a lot of lived experience of going from the majority to the minority, sometimes very abruptly and very traumatically. That is a source of information and insight and coping that that maybe we should think about carefully. So my last slide here. I think, so what do we do about this? Why is it important? And why should we even bother thinking about it when right now, as far as we know, there's no first contact happening? I think one of the things we always need to be thinking about preparation. We never know. We don't know when first contact is going to happen. It's probably just going to be a radio signal, right? That's probably what's going to happen, but that's going to be great. I'm all for it. But again, it's going to have some impact on our society. We're going to have to rethink our place in the cosmos once we make first contact. That could happen. It could be happening right now, right? This very instant. We could be, we could be receiving that radio signal right at this very moment. We just don't really know, or it could be decades. So it behooves us to make some adjustments, to start thinking, to lay some plans, right? It also, the other thing about all of this preparation is it gives us the opportunity, using the lens of first contact as kind of a way of focusing our attention, to sort of clean house, to pay attention to how we treat people and what we have going on here, and can we do better? Can we make this world a better place? Can we increase our own well-being and our own chances of surviving to first contact by thinking about first contact? How do we clean house and tidy up so that when ET comes, we've got a nice place for them to visit, and we're ready to be kind and generous hosts when they get here. And I am confident that I've missed things in my sort of discussion of ability and disability. I'm confident that there are other things I didn't think of, and obviously these ideas that I have talked about as distinct models are not distinct in the real world, right? All of our understanding of disability and one another is a glorious mishmash, a glorious patchwork of all of these ideas and sort of unthought through presuppositions and assumptions that we make about other people. That's just how human beings work, right? So there you go. I just thrown this mass of ideas at you. I'm excited to hear thoughts, responses, and thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you, Sheri. That was great. There are some comments in the chat. I will read them in a minute. I also want to just mention that throughout your talk, I've been thinking about this film. It's a short film called La Planète Sauvage. It's an animation film from the 70s. I think in English it's translated into Fantastic Planet, and I believe it's on YouTube. And I've been watching this movie several times, and in the story, in the narrative, there is this extremely advanced civilization that can communicate with through empathy and telepathy, and they find humans who are much smaller creatures. So the size of this extraterrestrial is gigantic, and they see humans as small toys. So in that case, even the different size of the two species poses the question of which species is more advanced, or so humans are being treated exactly like dolls, and they lose completely any agency. So thank you for your talk, and now we can open the floor to questions. If anyone wants to ask a question directly, you're free to use your microphone.
Sheri, you said that the medical model was something that you anticipated as being the most likely first contact.
It's the commonest on Earth. I don't know that it's the most likely that we would. It's the one that freaks me out the most, I think. I don't know that it's the most likely for them, but it is one of the most common ones that we use.
As someone with hyperacusis, I experience a conflict between my needs and those of the deaf and hard of hearing, in terms of if they want the sound louder and I want it softer. And I just wonder if perhaps there could be some conflict in our abilities to communicate with ET, such that we wouldn't even be compatible to a degree.
It's certainly possible, right? The thing that I think about when I think about questions like that is this probably isn't going to be their first rodeo, right? Because we are so young, right? I'm thinking that maybe they've done this go around before. And what I like to think of is, I think I heard this first from Carl Sagan talking about, well, you know, they probably have a xenolinguist and a xenoanthropologist who will say something like, well, that's clearly a type 4 civilization, and you know, they're at this stage, and we kind of like we do with, you know, psychology of ourselves, or people,
Right.
kids growing up, right? That person is still like at the toddler stage, or that person, you know, whatever. So yeah, I think it's an interesting question. And I wonder if they might be all ready to, you know, kindly or otherwise kind of categorize us and have a plan for whatever they think they ought to do, and kind of know how to implement that plan based on their understanding and perceptions of who we are and where we're at technologically and spiritually and psychically and all those other adverbs, right?
Yeah. Let's hope. Thank you. I really loved your discussion so far, especially the Ferengi model actually made the most sense to me about regarding the Fermi's paradox. I'm sure we may have nothing to offer them at this time.
Yeah, I know. I think, you know, we say that we're humble and small, but we are very proud. And I do think it'd be a hit, sort of psychologically, spiritually, and many other kinds of ways, you know, once we figure out that we are more like playthings. Especially, I mean, if they come and just wipe us all out, then, you know, the question's over, but I doubt that will happen. But I think coexisting with beings that have abilities that we just can't even understand is going to be difficult for us unless they make it easy.
There are some comments too. So the first one is, how about first contact will have individuals such as Geordi LaForge, the character from Star Trek NG, whose visual disability isn't. So with technology, his vision is even superior to the natural one. They will only be aware of our primitive scientific status, that we can't achieve the same abilities as they can.
Yeah, Geordi. We love Geordi. We all love hate Geordi, right? Because, you know, he is supposed to be a role model of a person with a disability, but they've erased his disability with technology, right? So yeah, no, he has bad cane technique, and he's not a good blind person with his visor off. He doesn't have skills, man, poor guy. But yeah, I think that's part of the question, right? So what is that going to be, what they would do? Like, okay, we're just going to fix all you guys. And would that be good? Would we like that? I don't know. Would I sign up for that? If someone came along and said, here's your, the aliens are here now, you're going to install the brain amplification and the new set of senses, would I go for that? I feel like there'd be a large number of people on Earth who would say, heck no, I'm not doing that.
There is one more comment. We can't ignore that another species might consider us far too violent to mingle with. In that case, they might stand by and look for signs of maturity.
Yeah, that's always the case. That's always a possibility. I mean, honestly, that might be what I would do. Like, be a lot of trouble maybe to take on these adolescent species and try to tame and civilize them and teach them to be kind to each other if they're not going to do that themselves. Maybe, you know, maybe historically, and this seems possible to me as well, that there might be just standard practice might be to leave these young civilizations alone until they figure themselves out. I don't know.
One more question. Interesting to say that there is no first contact as far as we know. The people who report first contact are immediately portrayed as crazy, or as you might put it, disabled. Has a person ever been believed who reported first contact?
I don't think so. I don't think anyone has been believed. I don't think that that they have been able to show evidence that has convinced other people. And again, I'm not here to say that they are that's the right, that has happened fairly or justly. You know, I'm not even really here to say that there has not been first contact on an individual level or some other way. I don't have evidence of that, but just because I don't have evidence of it doesn't mean that it's not true. And so I'm certainly open to that, but we haven't, as far as I know, acquired any kind of evidence that strikes scientists as evidence. And again, that doesn't mean it's not there. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It just means that it has not happened in a way that is graspable by mainstream science.
There is one last question. Not sure I fully understand. How will the Borg communicate with us in first contact? Will they see us as disabled since we aren't part of the hive and help us converting us?
I love Borg questions. Yeah. You bring on all the Star Trek references. I really don't know. I mean, it's possible that that either our civilizations have diverged in such a way or are so different from one another that we just aren't going to be able to perceive one another as sentient, which is the Borg problem, right? Unless the Borg are just evil. I've never been clear if they're just evil or if they just cannot perceive. I don't know. But either way, they're probably I like to think about a continuum, right? So there can be civilizations and kinds of beings that are wildly different from another, but if there are enough of them, then we'll fill in those differences. So there'll be some that are humanoid but different in maybe the Klingon or Vulcan way, and some that are humanoid but different in a way that's slightly more different than Klingons and Vulcans, and then maybe they're four-legged. Just like you get a continuum all the way in all the directions from one for us, if you want to put us in the middle. So a continuum of sort of like shaped and like-minded civilizations who can talk to one another, and out on the periphery, ones that are so different from us that we are just not going to be able to talk to them unless we tell the Vulcans, who tell the dog-shaped creatures, who tell the jellyfish, who tell the and maybe a communication can happen that way. But yeah, I feel like the ideas set forth by folks who believe and who have data about convergent evolution makes really good sense, but we probably can't count on ET being similar to us enough similar to us to make that really happen. But maybe if there's enough differences out there and enough individual instances of species out there, we will at least find some that can talk to us. And then if we organize properly, everyone can talk to everyone sort of eventually, kind of by playing telephone.
There is a remark and a question following from the remark. So Darrell asks, comments, I think this meeting was incorrectly titled. Not much about avoiding obliteration, more on human disability than anything else. There is also a question following on Darrell's comment. Do you have any suggestions for our actions now to let ET know that we are worthwhile and ready to collaborate?
I mean, point well taken, right? I definitely could have chosen a different title. And I think that, and in answer to the follow-up, I think that we kind of know what we're supposed to be doing, right? One of the things about people is they kind of know when they're doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. We know that destroying our planet and killing each other is a bad thing, right? We know when we're doing wrong. We know when we're not being productive and working together and being kind to one another. So I think we have the answer to that question. We just need to. It's the age-old question, right? How do you make people be kind and just and merciful to one another? I don't.
One of the things that emerged from the process of message composition was that at some point we hit a situation where any concept we were presenting was open to complete discussion. So how would you define disability when you are dealing also with the extraterrestrials? So maybe something we perceive to be a disadvantage might be an advantage from their perspective, or completely neutral, or they might not have this concept of disability at all. They might have evolved in a way that they don't have this concept as we have defined it in our human culture.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I cannot imagine us ever eliminating some kind of disability, even if we are even if we are disembodied psyches in some way, there will always be one disembodied psyche that's different enough from others that it would get the label of unfit or disabled or not as good. So I think that there will always be something like that. We will always have to deal with difference unless something really horrible happens and we all turn out in the future to be complete identical matches of each other. I think that would be even sort of worse. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the other part of the question.
I was just wondering if when dealing with the complete unknown, like speculating about a potential extraterrestrial civilization, they might not have evolved the concept of disability in our in their culture, for example. I don't know if that seems completely impossible for our human perspective, but who knows? I mean, maybe they have a completely different mindset that doesn't even conceive the idea of disability. So this is just a really far-fetched thought. If you don't have a specific answer, Sheri, don't worry. It's just me thinking loud.
No, I think I get what you mean. So, like, I mean, honestly, we could eliminate a lot of disabilities on Earth by just redesigning our environment, right? So, it wouldn't be a big deal to roll around in a wheelchair if we didn't put high tables and things people can't reach and steps everywhere, right? It wouldn't be a big idea. It wouldn't be a big deal to be blind if I had all the information I needed, you know, and good maps of things and everything were accessible to me in Braille, and I had all the information that everybody else has. Blindness is not a problem of not seeing. Blindness is a problem of lack of information. So if I had all the information I needed, and there weren't systematic barriers set up in the way of me getting all the information I needed, it would be no big idea. It'd be no big deal, whatever. So you don't perceive electromagnetic, you know, radiation in this way. That's not a problem because there's other ways of getting the same information. So it might be in that kind of world where I had all the information I wanted. So it might be interesting to be able to watch the pretty colors, but it's not something that I would need to do to be able to get my business done in society. So that's one way in which we could eliminate all the disabilities we wanted to by just redesigning our environment. And if they have done that, there's probably always going to be something they didn't anticipate or some person who is systematically excluded by the built environment. But it wouldn't have to be that way. So I think, Daniela, and your idea is not out of bounds at all. I think it's 100% possible that you would just say, oh, we've got a person shaped like this. Oh, well, we'll design the environment so that person can do fine. We could do most of that on Earth today if we wanted to.
Thanks, Sheri. There is one more question. I love your perception of disability as different abilities. On the other hand, what if just one alien crash lands here and we have an opportunity to care for them, but they have way more ability than us, and that's why they don't fit into our world? What if we have to make accommodations for them as if they are the disabled person, even though their misfit comes from a greater ability?
Oh, that's kind of cool. I mean, we have people sometimes on Earth who have extraordinary abilities, right? And sometimes that becomes a disability because of the limitations that we put on them. So I can totally imagine how that would happen, right? If one alien comes and they can do, I don't know, maybe they're telepathic. Would we be comfortable with that? Okay, I'm not comfortable with that. I could probably get used to it if I had to, but if you're asking me right now, do I want to hang out with a telepath? No, thank you. That makes me uneasy. I don't want people looking inside and seeing what I think, because a lot of times my thoughts are not charitable and kind. And I don't like it. Like my immediate reaction to that is, nope, I'm not comfortable with it. If you are telepathic, I don't want to do it. And probably if I sat down with myself for a minute and took a deep breath and realized that my mind probably isn't any darker and meaner, I'm not probably a more unkind, nasty human being than anybody else. So what have I got to hide? maybe I could probably get over it. But my initial reaction would be heck no. And I could think of maybe other situations where that might be the case.
Okay, a couple of comments. We revered someone like Stephen Hawking. His disability was practically invisible.
I'd sort of disagree that his disability was invisible because of the technology that we have. It took him a half hour to 45 minutes to make whole sentences, inconvenient as heck. I'm sure that was frustrating as hell for him. There are places on this planet where he could not go, lots of them. Things that he was not able to do because of his built environment. So his genius was his genius, but he was very much limited by the way that we have constructed society. So he was limited in the way that everyone else in a wheelchair is limited, and everyone else with a speech difference is limited. So yeah, we all admire him, but he still had to deal with those things.
Vanessa points out the great example about telepathy. I guess another example is a cheetah in a cage who loses muscle mass by not having space to run. And a few more comments highlighting. Sorry, Sheri, did you want to say something or?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about the cheetah in the cage. Yeah, absolutely, you lose muscle mass. And you think about one of the things that I was going to say I like, but I don't really like it. It's not very nice to say I like it. But one of the things that's super interesting is that when our heroes go to space, our astronauts, our incredibly fit astronauts, they come to space, they return disabled. They are generally able to overcome most of it, like the cognitive losses, the muscle losses are eradicated in time. But when they get back to Earth, even after a short trip, they are visibly and physically disabled, and to some extent the changes that happen in their eyesight don't always come back together.
There are a few more comments highlighting, I think, our human limits. So how ET response communicates with us will depend largely on how we treat them in return. Trust and non-violent communication will be hard for the collective human race, but necessary for our survival.
I mean, I super hope so, right? I hope that our best intentions equate to good intentions, are received as good intentions. One of the things we know, I mean, from linguistics and probably other disciplines as well, is that just because you say something that you intend to be kind, or you act in a way that you think is kind, you're not necessarily going to be perceived that way by the person on the other end who's receiving that communication or that action. I think we just can't know, which I hope translates into a whole heck of a lot of humility.
Okay, Jennifer has a comment about reports of abduction. I'm thinking of examples of the abduction report of Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson, and the people who came out many years later saying they saw the craft but were afraid to be seen as crazy, so never spoke out. Both Calvin and Charlie had physical puncture wounds that were documented at the time. The fear of being seen as crazy seems to play a big role in the fear of reporting this amateurish documentary, brings these people together many, many years later. In other words, the aliens could be here prancing around and not even care if they're seen, because every single person who reported such an event has been labeled a liar or crazy, and there are apparently lots, like well into the hundreds, military experts and all. In any case, reporting first contact, be it real or not, seems to be shunned by default as a mental disability a priori.
I mean, that's a fair point. One of the things that we can work on, and that we should work on, both because we fancy ourselves as ethical people, and if we want to make our clean house and get ready for first contact, is we should pay attention to the way that we treat people with mental illness, right? I mean, what's up with the way we treat folks who are living with depression or anxiety or whatever you're living with? That is no reason to make you into a pariah, right? That is the invisible disabilities like that, I think we still have a long way to go with justice and inclusion for those folks.
Okay, seems we covered all comments. Well, there is one about the, lots of comments now popping up, but I think we covered most of them. Thank you, Sheri. And it was really a pleasure to hear your perspective. And the aim of these workshops is really to bring underrepresented perspectives in SETI or cutting-edge perspectives. So this is really experimental, and we are hoping to bring to you some more food for thoughts around the topic of search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Thanks again, Sheri and Jasmine, for hosting this, and see you all at the next workshop.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your time.